Well, Minister Michael Wood was pre-booked as our lead interview today, but he pulled out on Thursday. And as you just saw, he now faces a parliamentary inquiry into his financial interests. With me now is National Deputy Leader Nicola Willis, who has led the opposition over this issue. Tinakwe, welcome to the nation.
Good morning.
Good morning. $16,000 worth of airport shares. It's hardly the greatest financial conspiracy of all times, is it?
No, which is why we just wonder, why didn't he clean it up straight away? This is a saga that went on for 2.5 years. Michael Wood had 12 interactions with the Cabinet Office, who are pretty serious people who wanted him to clean it up, and he didn't. It's inexplicable, really.
Yeah, we all agree that no one, let alone Michael Wood, can explain exactly why he didn't sell the shares, but it shouldn't really stop him from being a minister.
Well, I think the issue is actually about his honesty, because what we know is that he had these interactions where he was committing to do something about the shares, and he didn't. It's also about his adherence to the rules. You know, the Cabinet rules are there actually to protect ministers so that they can say, I've declared my conflicts of interest, the Cabinet Office is satisfied, I'm managing them well, it's all in order. But by not doing what they told him to do, he exposed himself, he exposed the Prime Minister, and he exposed the Cabinet as a whole.
Is this just a blip, really, though? Because does it really pertain to his overall responsibility as an Immigration Minister and a Transport Minister in the broader sort of area of those portfolios?
It goes to trust. The Prime Minister needs to be able to trust that his ministers are playing within the rules and that when they make commitments, they will keep them. And so having this ongoing saga with the Cabinet Office suggests that in some way Michael didn't think the rules applied to him. And to tell the Prime Minister you're going to sort it out and then not, that's pretty serious.
These kinds of issues about pecuniary interests, you know, raise their head every now and then. I mean, it happened with John Key when he was a backbencher. He had shares in Transrail when he was asking about rail projects. He later became Prime Minister. So they're a blip, really, on the road bump.
Well, see, here's the thing. I have enormous sympathy for the fact that ministers and members of Parliament are human beings who will make errors from time to time. There will be administrative issues that don't go quite right. But when you muck up, fess up, it's the putting right that counts. And
he has put it right now.
No, he took 2.5 years, Simon. Why was it that this week it took him 2 days to sell the shares, but for the past 2.5 years, despite multiple warnings from the Cabinet Office, despite multiple interactions on it, he didn't clean it up. That's the real issue.
So look, politically, this has been a free hit for Nationalists, not the first been served up by a Labor minister, granted, this year. You would expect a polling bump from this, but the race is really super tight. I don't understand why National isn't doing better.
Well, this, I think, goes to competence, and what New Zealanders want to see right now is a government...
So why isn't National doing better if it's about competence?
Well, I think what New Zealanders want to see is solutions to the massive problems facing our country. And the problems that are facing our country are a record cost of living, law and order out of control, a hospital system in crisis, schools where kids aren't attending. And what I want to be doing each week, sincerely, is talking about those issues. And this week, as much as we were prosecuting Michael Wood, it's our role as the opposition, I wasn't getting to talk about those issues.
Well, that's right.
I'd much prefer to talk about them.
So if those are the things that you believe the electorate wants to hear about, why isn't Christopher Luxon, who's a 17 to 18% preferred Prime Minister, not ahead of Chris Hipkins on all these things? I mean, this is a golden opportunity for National. I don't understand, is he dragging the polling down? No,
I don't think so. I think what this comes back to, as I say, is New Zealanders desperately want to hear solutions to the country's problems. So the goal that we have in the National Party is to take opportunities to communicate how we think we can fix those issues. So, and that's what campaigns are all about. We're looking forward to doing that over the next few weeks.
The only comparison I have really is, again, John Key, who 4 months out from the 2008 election was on about 38% approved Prime Minister ratings, you know. Christopher Luxon's nowhere near that.
Well, look...
That must be disappointing.
But what determines the shape of the government is our party vote. And what we can see from New Zealanders, that they hear our message, they want a change of government, they do think the country's going in the wrong direction, and our job is to grow our support to do that. Our caucus know that Chris Luxon will make an excellent Prime Minister. And I meet people every week who agree with us and who know that he has what it takes. He'll have what it takes to get things done, to sort out the economy, to get this place going.
All right, I understand you're backing Christopher Luxon like that, but you've been up front this week and you've sort of led the response to Michael Wood. But within your own party, it seems like you are the person that sort of mops up and clarifies statements by Christopher Luxon.
I don't see it that way at all. Can I just tell you
I can. Like, there's like the prescription issue, right, and contraception. That's one issue where you came out and said, we're looking at doing some particular kind of policy. And then again this week, the joke about whether people should have more babies because of this declining population. Once again, it's you coming out and clarifying, should it be you?
Well, look, it comes down to a very mechanical thing, Simon, which is that on Thursdays, Chris Luxon, just as Chris Hipkins does, make sure that he is travelling around the country, so he's meeting with real voters. So it means on Thursday, I'm the person who walks down to Parliament and does question time. What that means is I face questions on what we call the tiles from the press gallery, and it's just happened that on the past couple of Thursdays, I've ended up answering questions about issues.
When you're fronting there, surely the last thing you wish to be doing is clarifying or mopping up something that your leader has said somewhere else in the country.
Well, I do wish that this week journalists were asking me about Chris Luxon's infrastructure policy, which he announced to get things built again in New Zealand. Instead, some of them chose to focus on a joke he made in jest, take it out of context, misconstrue it, and in one case, liken it to a Hitler policy. I do regret that. I think that's wrong.
So you think
actually, it is my job to face. I think it's my job to face questions from journalists.
Yeah.
It's Chris Luxon's job to face questions from journalists. But I think New Zealanders would much prefer we were talking about the real issues, not offhand remarks.
But is it when it comes to issues with women that it seems that Christopher Luxon seems to be targeted at the moment or is struggling? I mean, why isn't he resonating?
Look, I think that he does resonate with many women. I think our job, as always, is to communicate with women how our policies and our leadership will make their lives, their families' lives, their communities' lives better. And that's what we want to be focused on.
Polling admittedly done from March by Roy Morgan showed that 52% of women favour a Labor-Greens coalition and 52% of men favour a National Act. Is National failing to connect with and bring those women over the line because you just don't have that many women on the front bench? I mean, there's you and there's 3 others.
Oh, we've got incredible women in the National Party team, but would I like to see more women supporting our party? Absolutely. When I look down our front bench and I see me, I see Erica Stanford, I see Louise Upston, we've got real talent.
But you don't have depth.
I think we do have depth because I know the
numbers.
Candidates that are coming through, I know the members of Parliament that contribute hugely to our team. I look at our President, Sylvia Wood.
Okay, so this is not a concern for you leading into the election that you may have trouble resonating with women?
As I've said, do I want to grow the women vote? Absolutely, yes I do, and that is something that we are
And do you think you can do that
focused
with
on.
Christopher Luxon as leader?
Yes, I do.
Let's talk bipartisan politics. Field Day is coming up this week. Is National going to use that to pull out of the bipartisan agreement He Waka Eka Noa?
Well, we will be using it to make policy announcements, and I hope that you will cover them and that the journalists will be very interested in them because we see farming as critical to New Zealand's future. Farmers pay a lot of bills in this country, and we're also a country that farms more sustainably and with more carbon efficiency than just about anywhere else in the world. So we should be backing farmers to do that.
Right, so that's status quo, really. That's not He Waka Eka Noa. That is status quo, isn't it, that you're going to be saying? You're going to pull out, you think it's dead in the water.
I'm not telling you what we're going to be saying about emissions policy, but yes, we are going to be making further announcements about emissions policy because we share, I think, what is the view of many New Zealanders, which is our farmers need to stay leading in the world as being sustainable and efficient, and that's going to mean in the future less methane from their animals.
Right,
and
so there is an emissions reduction policy.
Technology will play a huge role there.
But the government argues that your position would mean that it might harm the international reputation of farmers, and there is a growing market for low emissions products. Do you know what you're doing there? Are you going to harm farmers by doing something like this?
Well, the government doesn't know what our position is yet. Let's just take a step back and remember what's happened here. The government said they wanted to work with the farming sector to come up with a solution for agricultural emissions. The sector, in good faith, brought an agreement to the table, and the government said, we don't like it, we want to push you further, we want to change it. And that's what's actually led that accord to break apart. So it's nothing to do with National, it's actually about the way the government managed that negotiation and that relationship with the farming sector.
Oh, let's talk another bipartisan policy, and that's housing. So in 2021, you stood up next to Labor and said that Labor and National are standing together to allow housing in our backyards. That's been flipped on its head That was sort of mature bipartisan politics at the time. Are you sort of concerned that that's been tipped on its head, considering you were up front and centre for that one?
Well, no, because I'm confident that actually there remains agreement across Parliament, which hadn't occurred before, that the real way to address New Zealand's housing issues is to make sure that our consenting rules and our land zoning rules allow for more housing. Now, previously, prior to that agreement, that had not been the conversation. The conversation had been about people with Chinese-sounding names. It had been about Kiwi Build.
So
it had been about
great.
these policies that demonstrably...
Politics. So it's gone now, hasn't it?
Well, no, there is now a consensus across Parliament that what's at issue is consenting rules. National has said, well, we think that we can build on what's there. We've got a policy that enhances the status quo. In fact, you'll find it's very similar to the policy we initially suggested to Labour, and we're confident it will lead to more houses being built in New Zealand.
Finally, the party conference is coming up in 2 weeks. Will the electorate finally get to see your tax plan and how you're going to pay for those tax cuts?
I can assure you, Simon, that I'm very much looking forward to, prior to the election and even prior to the pre-election fiscal update, releasing our full tax plan.
So you commit to doing that before the pre-election fiscal update?
Yes, I do make that commitment, and that tax plan will set out not only how we're going to phase in our tax commitments, it will set out what exact items we are not going to be wasting New Zealanders' money on, so that we can allow them to keep
their own money. But it won't be at the
conference.
They won't be at the conference.
Well, the conference, I want to tell you, is going to be very positive, very policy focused. It's going to be about solutions to New Zealanders' problems. Labour's conference was all about national. We're going to make our conference all about New Zealand. Oh, look, we will point out where current policies are not delivering for people. You can be assured of that, but we want to focus on solutions.
Nicola Willis, Deputy National Party Leader, thank you so much for your time today.